What is up? Welcome back to the GamecockScoop.com podcast, the official podcast of GamecockScoop.com on the Rivals Network. We're live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, all the fun things. So if you're on any of those, pop in, leave some comments. We'll try to engage with those comments. We do this every week on Thursday to preview the game. Then we begin on Saturday or Sunday to review the game. I'm Caleb Alexander, publisher and recruiting writer at Gamecock Scoop, and I'm here with Alan Cole, who is the beat reporter, covers every major sport, and even some of the non-major ones sometime. All right, let's get right into this weekend, which is big in a lot of ways. Got the number one team in the country coming to town. It's also a very big recruiting weekend. I'm going to write more about this tomorrow in my weekly recruiting wrap-up, which I put out every Friday. The weekly recruiting wrap-up presented by myperfectfranchise.net. Oh, we got our first sponsor on the weekly recruiting wrap-up. By the way, if any of you are business owners or anything, still looking for podcast sponsors. So reach out, rivals, gamecockscoop@gmail.com, or you can just tweet at me or something. We'll figure something out. But yeah, so big recruiting weekend. If you follow recruiting at South Carolina at all, this is the way Beamer put it in his press conference earlier this week. If you follow recruiting at all at South Carolina, you know how important the weekend is. And that's largely because five-star Nicholas Harbor is taking an official visit this weekend. Something we've been talking about for weeks. He's definitely the biggest recruit left on the board. There's a few others. If you go back, it was 3 or 4 weeks ago to my weekly recruiting wrap-up, I kind of laid out what the board looks like left, but no doubt that Harbor, the five-star athlete out of the DMV region, is the number one guy still on the board. I actually am previewing the visit with Zabari Sandy, DB commit for South Carolina. He was the first commit in the recruiting class. He's been an ambassador really since he committed, and he, with Tosin Babalade, aka Big Tree, and Desmond Umeozulu, along with the rest of the D-line recruiting class and several other 2023 commits, are all going to be on campus this weekend to try to land Harbor in the boat. That was a nice little pun that I didn't mean to. I guess the boat would land in the harbor, but you get what I'm saying. So yeah, as said, the class is doing its part. The coaches are doing their part. Now the visit just has to play out, and we'll kind of see what happens. If you've been keeping up with my Futurecast, I have a Futurecast set for Nicholas Harbor. Haven't had any reason to change it up until this point. Looking forward to seeing what he says coming out of this weekend and kind of going from there. I know Michigan's another big player there. There was a bunch of 2024 and 25 guys on campus for the Georgia State game. We've started to roll out some of those articles. Cameron Michael was one that we caught up with this week. We got a Mazio Bennett article coming out in the next few days from Lee Wardlaw. There's a few more 2024 guys on campus this weekend. I know Josiah Thompson and Cam Pringle, to name a few. Cam Pringle's supposed to be back again for SC State too, so few visits there. And then the 2025 Rivals recruiting rankings came out this week, or at least the initial Rivals 100 for 2025. And actually the number one overall player, which is David Sanders out of Charlotte. He plays at Providence Day. He's an offensive tackle. He's going to be in town for the game too. So number one overall player of the 2025 class, which seems like forever away, but you got to lay the foundation. Yeah, exactly. You gotta lay that foundation. Also, 2025 D lineman Amari Adams. He's visited several times already. He was one of the few 25 recruits at the cookout. He's supposed to be in town this weekend as well. He didn't make that initial top 100, but it's only a matter of time, in my opinion. He's 6'5", 280 pounds as a sophomore. He's a beast, in-state guy. So yeah, there's a lot of big names on campus this weekend. I'll have a full list of the recruiters posted on that weekly recruiting wrap-up first thing tomorrow. Another official visitor, Jatavius Shivers, who's already committed. Remember, he was committed to Vandy and then decommitted, and then committed to South Carolina. But he actually hasn't taken an official visit to South Carolina yet, so he's doing that this weekend. A little bit on the basketball front. So one of the top in-state targets, we talked a little bit about this before. 2024 four-star Cam Scott is supposed to take his official visit to South Carolina in a few weeks for the Texas A&M weekend. So that's October 22nd. And then this weekend, three-star point guard Elijah Crawford, who's out of Greenville. He goes to Legacy Early College in Greenville. He's taking an unofficial visit this weekend. He posted that on his Twitter a couple days ago. And even though he's a three-star, his offer list is pretty impressive thus far. So you got Georgia, LSU, Ole Miss, Wichita State, Xavier, and Indiana. So that would be another one in-state guy that South Carolina would really like to have. I think that's pretty much it as far as recruiting goes. Like I said, tomorrow morning, weekly recruiting wrap-up. That's a premium article. If you don't have Rivals Premium, it's only $100 a year. So hop on that, or you can pay $10 a month, whatever, cheaper than Netflix, as I keep saying. And, where else are you going to get this specific of recruiting coverage and team coverage and everything else that we have on GamecocksGroup.com.
Bunch of stats for you that you're not going to find in a box score that drop every Monday.
Yeah, that's actually one of my favorite articles that we've been looking at thus far. Anything fun from last week? I mean, I don't know if they were fun, because some of them were a little negative, but what was your favorite stat from last week?
And we've got a note on it to discuss later, but it's the Antoine Wells Jr. thing. I mean, he popped against Arkansas, 2 big explosive plays, but we weren't really sure who the main target was going to be for Rattler, especially on big plays, but on 3rd and 4th downs, it's pretty clear where he's looking, at least through 2 games.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see now that, some teams have some film on him. Obviously, Georgia's defensive staff is one of the best in the country. I'm interested to see how they handle Wells. Do they kind of try to bracket him and take him out of the game? And then, does that open things up for a couple of the other options? Do we see some more Jaheim Bell in the receiving game this week, which I know we're going to talk about too? So I'm interested to see how Georgia kind of plays him, because that was something, even though South Carolina struggled against Georgia last year, they did hit some big plays in the passing game, especially in the first half. So, all right, let's get into the bad news first, and then we'll kind of try to find some hope as we're heading into this weekend against the number 1 team in the country. So, injury updates. What are you hearing since last week on injuries?
I mean, the first ones you got to start. It's Mo Kaba and Jordan Strawn, both tore their ACLs, both out for the season. I think we had a pretty good idea that was coming, at least with Strawn. We talked about it last Saturday in the post-game wrap-up, just the way that one looked, the amount of time he was in the tent. There's no way around it. It's brutal. Strawn's had one of these in 2020 before. Kaba is losing his spot now to Sherrod Green, who's had 2 of these back-to-back years in 2000, not ACLs, but season-ending injuries in September 2020 and 2021. It's brutal. There's no way around it. Strawn was a starter. Kaba was a starter. There's no other way around it. It's just a terrible, terrible start to SEC play for South Carolina on that front. And it only got worse. But in terms of guys out for the season, it's those 2 for now.
Yeah, we did kind of hint at both of those after the game on Saturday. Both positions of need, both positions that you're kind of thin. So you're going to see Sherrod Green, which you wrote a good article about how, this is his 6th year. He's been through a couple of injuries over the past couple of years, including one that he sustained against Georgia last year. So he's been trying to talk to those guys, especially Mo Kaba, about, keeping your mentality positive and everything, and working your way back. And if anyone knows, he would, obviously. And then you got Gilbert Edmond kind of stepping into that role for Jordan Strawn, which he's looked pretty good. He's flashed here early in the season, but he's definitely, it would be nice to have him as a depth piece coming off the bench instead of it being completely on him. We might see some Terrell Dawkins kind of step into that reserve role that Edmond's been playing.
I think Tyree Jones might get a lot more snaps this weekend too.
Yeah, that too. So, and this is why you bring in a transfer like Terrell Dawkins, right? You're trying to build that depth. We kind of thought maybe he would push for a starting role, but now he's going to have to step up if he's called to. Same with Tyreek Johnson, like you said. And then there's a bunch of guys that we don't really know at the moment. Hopefully, we'll hear some more tonight on Carolina Calls about the specifics. But we got Corey Rucker, Cam Smith, David Spalding, R.J. Roderick, Boogie Huntley. As of the last we heard, all questionable for Georgia. What do you have any feeling on any of those, and what you think might actually play out there?
I'm just trying to think. I want to be careful what I say because I don't know, and this stuff's just so fleeting at times. But Spalding, I feel shaky on because he didn't make the trip to Arkansas at all. He didn't even make the travel roster. Roderick didn't either, but it does sound like Roderick gets healed a little bit quicker if you're kind of reading between the lines. Now, how much Roderick would play anyway, because Nicky Manwari's played so well. We talked about him Saturday. We've talked about him basically every podcast through all of camp. I mean,
right.
He might have that job anyway, but Cam Smith, I mean, that's the one that I don't really have a read on, and that's the important one. My Cam Smith thing is, maybe it's not long-term. Maybe he's not going to miss a month. But if it was something minor, he wouldn't have missed 2.5 quarters at Arkansas because that's someone they really, really need on the field. He's probably the most talented player on that defense. That's an NFL first-round pick. If it was minor, he wouldn't have been out that long, which is all I'm going to say on that, which kind of makes me think he might be trending a little bit more towards the questionable side. But I also know that it's Georgia. He's a competitor. He's going to want to be out there. If he's anywhere close to feeling like he can play, he's going to be out there. But I thought it was interesting that they didn't even try to get him back in the game last Saturday.
Yeah, it's very, very, especially this season. It's been tough to kind of read between the lines on what we were saying. You remember preseason, we kind of were like, I don't know if Christian Bill Smith or Corey Rucker are going to play, but he took a long time to like fully admit that. So yeah, I kind of have that same feeling with Cam Smith, as I'm not sure. Maybe we'll hear tonight, but I am definitely starting to look at the depth chart and wonder who's going to step into that role. Darius Rush, it sounds like he got a little banged up, but he should be fine.
He looked okay. He came back in the game in Arkansas, so that doesn't surprise me.
But we might see some more O'Donnell Fortune get leaned on here this weekend. Who else could we see kind of step into that nickel role?
A nickel. I was talking about general, but yeah, that is kind of the thing. If you're South Carolina right now, if Cam Smith can't go, if David Spalding can't go, okay, well, someone's got to play nickel. It was O'Donnell Fortune last week. I don't really. I'm trying to think because Clayton White did. I'm pulling up my notes now. Clayton White did kind of address that yesterday. Somebody in the press conference did ask him, "What's the plan? What's the contingency plan?" He was kind of, I don't know what the word is. Nobody's giving away injury information at this point. Those kind of are state secrets, but he didn't sound like he thought both of those were going to be out, which was interesting. Which maybe that's what he wanted to sound like. But he did imply that there were plans in place for, I guess that'd be a third string goal.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly agree with what you said a minute ago about.
Bone Bland making it 2D.
We froze up there for a second. All I was saying is I agree with what you were saying about Cam Smith mentally, like his mentality. If he can physically go, if they can strap whatever the problem is down and let him go, he's gonna be out there. But sometimes mentally isn't enough. What were you saying about Stone Blanton? I'm sorry.
He's on the 2 deep now. It's the first time we've seen him. I guess he's now Sherrod Green's backup. He was the third string at that spot, at that Mike linebacker spot, but Mo Cobb was obviously down. So that's a true freshman who I don't think played a defensive snap against Georgia State or Arkansas, who is now one injury away from being your starting.
Yeah, and a very talented guy, but
yeah.
a very talented guy, but you don't want a Trushman starting against the number one team in the country if you can help it. And you might have two.
With him, he's not going to start, but yeah, he's not going to start. But you're always one play away. Especially, unfortunately, there's no way around it. Which Green's injury record is history.
And then so I mean, this defense going into the season, we were very much like that could be a strength of the team, but they're very thin, and we're immediately in these first few weeks seeing that depth tested. And I don't know. I mean, some of those young guys are going to have to step up quick. Guys like Gilbert Edmond, guys like Stoneblatt, and we've already seen Nick Emamori. I mean, they're just going to have to mature quicker than maybe would have been ideal.
Oh, Marcellus Dial, by the way, said would be the nickel if Cam and David Spalding both can't go. Finally got that note pulled up.
Okay, that makes sense.
Clayton White said yesterday.
All right, so
and
all the injuries.
Oh, one more thing. The carry on Joyner should be good to go Saturday. That's my only other injury note. Beamer said he practiced as of Tuesday. He practiced twice this week. I assume he practiced Wednesday and Thursday as well. Sounds like Joyner's going to be a go.
All right. Yeah, my Wi-Fi is playing nice with your Wi-Fi right now, so we're a little bit laggy, but that's okay. So despite all the injuries, let's get into the game itself. So Georgia's number one team in the country. They just blew the doors off of a pretty talented Oregon team. I don't know if we can say yet whether or not, they're who they're gonna be.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. But they have a lot of talent on that roster. And then, of course, they played Samford, so we can't gather too much from that, except for they settled for more field goals than touchdowns against Samford than maybe I would have expected, but they still won by 30 points. So
33.
So does Georgia have a weakness? What do you see as a potential mismatch in this, if there is?
I'm not going to go as far as saying mismatch. I think that's a little bit much, but secondary is a little bit unproven, I guess. That's kind of something Kirby Smart's talked about. I mean, they lost a ton of players to the NFL. Everybody knows how good their defense was last year. It's not breaking any new ground with that. But yeah, it is. It does. It's not quite the same thing as you saw last week at Arkansas, where Arkansas was literally down 2 starters in the secondary. But they are unproven. I mean, they're all 4 and 5 stars. There's crazy talent on that Georgia roster, but they are unproven. First road game, that's something Kirby Smart talked about this week, and Shane Beamer talked about. Beamer actually mentioned that unless there's fifth-year seniors, nobody's played in a full Williams-Brice in that roster, because last time they came to Columbia was in the COVID year. Which I guess he's right. I didn't think about that until he said it, but yeah, I guess that would qualify as a weakness. But you're really grasping at straws. This is a really complete Georgia team.
Yeah, which, by the way, they just announce that the game's a sellout, so Williams-Brice will be full. And I did like Beamer's quote that said, "If you need more time to tailgate, just wake up earlier." So, get those morning mimosas set up there on the tailgate, and do what you got to do to be ready to go for noon. But he basically shrugged off the idea that it's not a night game, that the environment's somehow going to be lessened by it not being a night game. And yeah, I've heard it get plenty loud there at noon. It's just some things need to happen early to put that pressure on the youth of Georgia that you're talking about, especially on that defense. I talked a little to Anthony Dasher at UGAsports.com. I'll post that at the end of this podcast episode. Also, you can see what he wrote about Georgia on GamecocksGroup.com. We posted that yesterday in our From the Other Side series that we do with opponents each week. And he mentioned some of the same things, like, they're all 4 and 5 stars. They're pretty good across the board, but they haven't really been tested. I mean, Bo Nix is talented in some ways, but he's Bo Nix. Yeah, he's, to me, the Spencer Rattler, if he is playing the way that he can play, had the most talented quarterback that they faced so far this year, which is not even that big of a stretch to say. But I do think unlike the Arkansas game, when he has his opportunities to hit a deep shot here or there, he's going to have to connect on some of those, because I don't see South Carolina sort of methodically moving the ball down the field, at least not on a drive-by-drive basis.
No, this was something I wrote a little bit about. I dropped a story today about the tight end battle in this game. Georgia, obviously, probably the best. I don't even say probably. They do have the best tight end room in the country. Brock Bowers, Darnell Washington, Eric Gilbert, who hasn't even played that much because it's just that deep. He's a former 5-star. South Carolina, Marcus Satterfield said yesterday that he needs to get the ball to the tight ends more. He put that on himself. He took responsibility for maybe not seeing as much of Jaheim Bell as we have. But that's where those deep shots come in. That's where pushing the ball vertically comes in. And, yeah, Rattler's got to hit those. He missed 2 last week, 1 in each of the first 2 quarters. It would have been touchdowns if he had connected. Where a receiver, I think it might have been Amari Brown both times. But
I think
in
so
any
too,
case,
yeah.
a receiver got behind the Arkansas secondary. And if Rattler connects, that's a completely different game we're talking about last week.
Yeah, no doubt. The thing with the Jaheim Bell thing, I don't mind that they've put him in the backfield some, try to get the ball in his hands in creative ways, all that sort of thing. But to me, it seems obvious that he should have been more involved in the passing game as a true sort of mismatch against linebackers or whatever over the middle. We saw that work very well in the bowl game. We also saw him take some toss play around the corner or whatever in the bowl game, and that worked very well too. I think you can do both.
The first rushing play of the game at Arkansas, it was a toss, yeah.
Right, yeah, I think you can do both, but there's definitely been a lack. He's got 3 receptions for 18 yards, or it may not even be any.
Yeah, he's got way more rushes than he does catches right now, which I don't think that should be the case with players talented as Jaheim Bell in the passing game.
And as much as it is a good idea to get him involved in the run game, I think I like the sort of end around thing as much as lining him up in the backfield, because to me it seems like when he's in the backfield you kind of know what's coming, right? Like, okay, that's going to be a toss play to Bell. I haven't scripted every single play to see if he ever just like blocks or whatever, but for the most part it seems like when he's in there he's getting the ball. And you also think this week you cannot wait until Arkansas had 113 yards or maybe more than that before Marshawn Lloyd got his first carry. You can't wait that.
Got his first carry.
Yeah, you can't wait until the second quarter to give their first carry to a running back. I'm not saying that you're going to be able to like dominate this Georgia front. You're definitely not. But you have to have some semblance of a run game. You have to get into decent third down situations. If we look at the last 2 games, they went 3 of 14 on third down against Georgia State and 3 of 10 against Arkansas. So that's combined 6 and 24 third down so far. And yeah, that's not acceptable. You're not going to win ball games, especially against superior opponents or even equal opponents, if you keep that up.
No, I asked Marcus Satterfield about that point blank yesterday. I asked him about third downs, and he said, quote, he made a big stink of that. I'm using his exact words. He made a stink of third downs in the team meeting rooms this week. He said that they have to be better there. It's just straight up that I think the other word he used was unacceptable for the amount of the quarterback talent they have and the wide receiver talent they have to be this bad on third downs. He did mention they converted some 2nd and 10s last week. That's true. I think the touchdown drive that cut it to 21-16, I believe they had 2 2nd and 10 conversions. And obviously, the touchdown was on a third down. But for the most part, they were in third downs. They were in third and longs. The sack on Spencer Rattler from Bumper Pool that kind of stalled South Carolina's momentum after they cut it to 5 was on a 3rd and, I think, 9 or 3rd and 10. Yeah, got to be better 1st and 2nd downs. And that goes back to what Shane Beamer's talked about, what Satterfield's talked about, what everybody's talked about. They got to run the ball.
Yeah, well, that's kind of the problem is like you can make us think about third downs, but really I think the problem is on 1st and down. You're getting into too many 3rd and long situations. I mean, just compared to what Arkansas did last week, where almost all of their third downs that I can remember were like 3rd and 2, 3rd and 3. It's like, okay, well, that's a much more high percentage play. You have the whole playbook versus the defense being able to pin back their ears and just pass rush an already shaky offensive line. And that offensive line is definitely going to be tested this week. So I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't know what specifically you're looking for this week. Like, is there a way for South Carolina to actually make this game a second half game? And what are the keys to that? And my number one would have to be that the O-line's just going to have to play better than we've seen them play maybe over the last two seasons.
Yeah, I mean that's obviously that's where the game starts and ends. That was Sam Pittman's. I think he said in his opening statement after South Carolina, that's a line of scrimmage league if you want to make it that, and we do, which clearly they did with almost 300 rushing yards last week. My only other thing, and it's not new, we just talked about it. Spencer Rattler, just you got to hit the deep balls. That's pretty much what it comes down to. I don't think he's going to get as many chances as he did against Arkansas. I don't expect there to be a free runner once a quarter, which is pretty much what happened against Arkansas. But that makes it all the more important that the one or two, you're probably only going to get one or two coverage busts a game against this Georgia defense. And when you get them, and there's a chance to push the ball for chunk plays 30, 40 yards down the field, got to connect. There's really no other way to say it.
Yeah, and this is something that I've seen with Spencer Rattler so far, is he doesn't seem to trust tight windows so much. And then he's missed some wide open guys. But I know several times, and the broadcast was talking about this a little bit last week, that he would his back step on a 3-step or 5-step drop, and instead of just letting it go, and he would have a guy, if he just let it go, I mean, it would be close, but he would have a guy if he's trying to hit this timing, if he trusted his receiver there. He kind of double takes, and then the play breaks down and it turns into backyard football. Sometimes that's worked out. I mean, we work out a couple times for the first 2 weeks. But sometimes that's where he starts making these crazy decisions, or he gets sacked or whatever. So I think there just needs to be a little bit of a crispness, because you're not going to get a ton of wide open guys. Like you said, there needs to be a little bit of a trust, and I'll take a couple of interceptions. I'm not throwing into double coverage or whatever, but I'll take a couple one-on-one battles that you just lose if you give your guy a chance at it. But I don't think that you can play conservative in this game and still make it a second quarter or a second half game and still put the pressure on Georgia in that way.
Yeah, and it's funny though. That's kind of the whole ironic point. You talk about those one-on-one battles, and sometimes you lose them. Yeah, you will against a team that's talented, but Jaheim Bell can win a lot of those. That's a big body with really good hands. We've already seen Antoine Wells can win one-on-one battles. That throw in the first game against Georgia State, that's Jalen Brooks getting behind his man, winning. I know it's a Georgia State cornerback, not a Georgia one, but that's Jalen Brooks getting behind his man, winning a one-on-one battle. Like that's the biggest positive. I wrote a little bit about this in Fayetteville last week too. We don't have an identity yet for this offense, but we know there's talented skill players. We haven't even seen Corey Rucker get back in the fold yet. Maybe he plays Saturday, maybe not. But at some point, that's another very talented receiver back in there who can cause problems, who can, I don't know if you want to decoy him, and maybe that's how you get the ball to Wells or whoever more. Josh Vann has one catch for 9 yards in 2 games. I don't really know what the deal is with that, but that was your leading receiver last season by a pretty healthy margin. Going to need more from him. Go ahead.
He had over 100 yards against Georgia last year. I mean, be a good time for him to pop that out again.
I don't know what the problem is there, but that's good. I mean, if Josh Vann finished this game with 0 catches again like he did last week, I'm almost certain South Carolina is not going to win.
Yeah, both he and Jalen Brooks had big receiving games last year in this game. So, maybe they can recreate that. I do think, like you said, you have to get Jaheim Bell involved. And then, yeah, you have to have some semblance of a run game. Even if it's Marshawn Lloyd ending this 75 rushing yards or something like that, I mean, that would be fine. But at least at that point, you have probably had a couple of drives sustained. You've kept your defense fresh, which is something that they struggled big time with against Arkansas last week. And yeah, put a little bit of, or taking a little bit of pressure off of Spencer Rattler, which at the end of the day, if South Carolina is going to compete in this game, it is going to rest on his shoulders. He's going to have to be the former 5-star. He's going to have to be the former Heisman frontrunner or whatever. But I think anytime you can help him out, you should definitely do that.
Yeah, I mean that is where it comes back to. It's a line of scrimmage league and it's a quarterback league, and I think we've covered both of those plenty. But yeah, it's funny you talk about keeping the defense fresh, getting bodies in and out, not having them have to face. I think it was 86 snaps last week at Arkansas. I might be having the number wrong, but it was something like that. It's even
Time
more
of
important
possession was at least 10 minutes off.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's even more important this week because you're down so many guys. Minimum 2 guys you had last week aren't going to be there this week. It could be as many as 6 on that defense. We don't know what the questionables are going to look like. But you're down even more bodies, and you're going to have to figure out ways to keep. Yeah, I mean, again, you talk about stats you could read now where I could tell you who wins the game. If time of possessions, Georgia plus 10, plus 12, plus 14 minutes, yeah, South Carolina's not going to win. It probably will be over by halftime.
So I know neither one of us picked South Carolina to win this game. By the way, each week our staff does a full pick of the South Carolina game, but also like 10 or so games around college football. We post that on Fridays, so check out GamecockScoop to check it out. I know neither one of us did. Actually, one of our staff, which I'll let it stay a surprise, did pick South Carolina to win this one, which, hey, I hope he's right. That would be amazing for us. Make it a lot more fun to talk about. But so neither one of us picked them to win. What are you looking for? What are some signs of success in this game, even if South Carolina doesn't necessarily win it?
So my big one, and this is what I'm looking at more than anything, turnovers. I mean, you had Spencer Rattler threw a bad pick against Georgia State, part of 2 turnovers in that game. South Carolina turned the ball over twice in the fourth quarter last week at Arkansas. That was something Beaver said. Again, you just can't do if you want to win on the road in the SEC. If South Carolina can get through this game without a turnover, or even one fluky bounce, fumble, weird thing turnover, but no bad decisions, okay, that's progress. That's understanding the offense more. That's understanding roles more. That's probably means Spencer Rattler's making better decisions. And if you get turnovers the other way, if you force 1 or 2 from Georgia and you're +1 or +2, okay, there's those extra possessions Beamer was talking about. But that's my big thing. I'm looking at turnovers, especially against a defense this good. If you can play a clean football game, even if it gets away on the scoreboard, I think that's legitimate progress going into the rest of the schedule.
Yeah, I mean, if South Carolina really going to have a chance in this one, I think you have to win the turnover battle. You probably need at least one game-breaking play on special teams. And, yeah, you're going to have to hit some big plays on offense and put the pressure on early. I don't really see a scenario where you fall down 2 or 3 scores to Georgia and somehow work your way back into it.
I certainly wouldn't imagine.
I think you have to start fast, which is another thing that this team has sort of struggled with so far this season, even against Georgia State and at home. We talked about their struggles on the road starting fast, but it's not like they've been blazing at home either. So I think you have to start fast, win the turnover battle, probably steal a possession on special teams or have some sort of breaking play on special teams. And even I think we talked about this before. South Carolina needs to play their A game, and Georgia probably can't play their A game, maybe not even their B game. And then you let the chips fall where they may. I mean, on paper, obviously, Georgia is favored by almost 25 points for a reason. But they play the game on paper. They were favored by this much in 2019 when South Carolina won.
We talked about it this week, and we talk about special teams. Any stupid South Carolina Georgia game you've ever watched in your life probably involves something on special teams that went South Carolina's way. Whether that's Melvin Ingram taking a fake punt, whether that's Georgia missing 3 chip shot field goals in 2014, whether that's Rodrigo Blankenship missing a short field goal in overtime in 2019. These games are weird, man. I don't have to explain it to you. I grew up in Georgia. You grew up in South Carolina. These games are weird. You never know.
Yeah. Yeah, we also talked about just sometimes Georgia comes into Williams-Brice Stadium and just has a very off game. I mean, I think about Quincy Carter, who eventually was an NFL quarterback throwing 5 interceptions or whatever it was against Lou Holt's team. So, yeah, I mean, weird things happen in the series. I'm hoping for a little weirdness this weekend. That'll be fun to watch. But yeah. So you said limit the turnovers. Another thing that I'm looking for, regardless, win, loss, whatever, is the offensive line just playing a more complete game. I thought that they did improve from week 1 to week 2, but obviously you're playing a elite front seven this week, and you're gonna have your hands full with Jalen Carter. If he makes some plays on you, whatever. I mean, that's a future, long time NFLer probably, as long as he stays healthy. But you can't have 6x. You can't have no running game. So really need to just see some cohesiveness, some improvement, and some push from the O-line. And then sometimes you take your lumps here and there, but I don't see this game even being close if the O-line plays the way they have the first 2 weeks.
Yeah, and that goes back to another thing with Rattler I'm looking for. Some of this has been by design. Satterfield, Beamer, moving him off his spots, getting him on the roll. And some of it has just been him, I think, not trusting this offensive line to block long enough, where he's kind of moved on his own. And like you said earlier, that's been a mixed bag. He's had some really good throws on the run. He's made some pretty bad decisions. Both those bad interceptions he threw were times where he was rolling on the run, trying to do too much. I'm interested to see if the offensive line gives him time, how comfortable he is sitting in the pocket and delivering versus how much he still wants to get out on the run. And I don't know how well that's going to work, especially against this Georgia defense. They move so quick side to side. The linebackers are so fast, cover all 53 yards horizontally. I'm not sure if Spencer Rattler on the run is a winning formula in this game, at least not consistently.
Yeah, this is something we were talking about as we were watching the game against Arkansas too. Very rarely does he elude pressure by stepping up in the pocket, and it pretty much always is rolling out, which if he wants to play on Sundays, he's going to have to figure that out. He's going to have to learn how to step up around the pressure, because I do think some of those sacks last week you could maybe put on him, that he kind of, instead of taking his lane inside and getting rid of the ball, he kind of tried to go outside and then exposed himself to unblocked defenders. So it'll be interesting to see if he can kind of settle in a little bit there. But like you said, it's kind of chicken or an egg thing, because the O-line hasn't been all that trustworthy too. So you understand it's a little quick to run around. Any other signs of success for Carolina this weekend, win or loss? Anything else you're looking for?
It's not really so much performance-based, but dear God, don't get anyone else hurt. That's kind of the other thing. I mean, you've got 2 games coming up against Charlotte and SC State. Those should be get-right games. Those should be get-healthy games before you get into the rest of the SEC schedule. You can't have anyone else go down, especially on that defense, which I know that's not really maybe fair. That's not performance-based. That's not something you can really evaluate other than just someone got hurt or they didn't. But that's kind of what I'm looking for too, even though, again, maybe you can't judge anything on that.
Yeah, I mean, I know it's we should be talking about the game at hand, but like we said, on paper, it is what it is. Let's look at the schedule after this, though. Do you think things get a little bit easier? And as the first few weeks have played out, some teams that maybe looked a lot more intimidating at the beginning of the year look a little bit less. Maybe some teams that looked less look a little bit more. So yeah, you got Charlotte and SC State after this. Should win both of those. Should go into the Kentucky game 3-2. Kentucky looked good, but it's kind of hard to tell how good Florida is. I don't know if they're a top 10 team. Kentucky, I mean. Texas A&M obviously lost to App State. Missouri, Missouri does not look good. Yeah,
I said this to you on I think it was our post SEC Media Days podcast, that I thought Missouri had the worst quarterback situation in the SEC, Vanderbilt included. Like, I actually think Mike Wright is probably better than anything Missouri can put out there. And sure enough, 4 straight possessions with a pick last week from 2 Missouri quarterbacks. That's a game. That's an SEC game South Carolina should win comfortably. We'll get to that in Missouri week. That's the end of October, but that's significantly terrible right now, I think.
No, yeah, but that's what I'm looking at here is like, I know it's September 15th. A lot of things are going to change. We've seen how much things can change from an injury standpoint in just 1 week. But I think you have a reasonable chance. Vanderbilt's after Missouri. I think you have a reasonable chance going into Florida to be 6-3, 5-4. Sort of looking at this
Right.
that last stretch there.
You're talking about splitting Kentucky and A&M, obviously beating Charlotte and SC State, beating Missouri. Yeah, you're talking about basically winning all the games you're supposed to and splitting Kentucky and A&M. You'd be 6-3 going to the Swamp.
Which doesn't sound like an impossible task anymore. Yeah.
No,
so,
it doesn't. But you got to stay healthy. That goes back to my original point that you can't have more guys get hurt this weekend.
Right. So, South Carolina fans, let's enjoy this game on Saturday. Let's hope that some weird stuff happens, that the home field advantage plays a role, which sold out crowd. Hopefully it will. But I don't want to see people on the message board just freaking out like the end is not all this stuff, right? Like, you're playing the number one team in the country. You're playing the defending national champions. If you covered the 25-point spread, which is, that's it for a reason. The season's not over, right? Like, it's going to get a lot easier after this week. So, trust the process, try to enjoy this game. And
Thanks, Nick.
I hope that, I hope we come on here Saturday and Sunday and this soundbite is stupid, and that they ended up shocking the world or whatever, which I know I'm not supposed to say shock the world.
Beamer had a whole thing about that. Someone asked him Tuesday about that. He said he doesn't want to hear shocking the world. He doesn't want to hear about Appalachian State beating A&M. He doesn't want to, he wants them to believe this is a football game they can win. I guess that's fine to say. And I don't know, 45 hours from now, they're going to take the field with a delayed kickoff, by the way. If you're watching from home, Beamer mentioned something about how they're going to show 2001 in Sandstorm, exclusively on ESPN. So I think we're looking at a 12:05 kick if you're planning your pregame, I don't know, beer runs or whatever, if you're at home. Or if you want to tailgate an extra 5 minutes. It sounds like ESPN's going to push his kickoff back, but it's going to be a crazy environment. I'm excited to see it. This is what you want. It's going to be fun. I don't know what the game's going to look like, but come on. Number one team. It's only the fourth time ever the number one teams come to Columbia. Obviously, South Carolina won one of those first 3 games. It's what you want. It's what you're here for.
Yeah. Well, and as beat up as the South Carolina defense is right now, there is still a scenario where they get some of that turnover bug back that they had last season. Can kind of force a couple things to happen. And then I still definitely don't think that South Carolina's played their best offensive game that they're going to play this year. There's just too much talent on that side of the ball for them to have been as inconsistent as they are. And I think at some point it is going to come together. I don't know if it's going to come together from every point it comes together onward through the rest of the season, but I do think there are going to be some games where you're just like, wow, there's all that talent and it's all working. It'd be nice if that happens this weekend against the sort of young secondary of Georgia, young linebackers of Georgia. But we'll just have to see how it plays out. All right, give me a score prediction. Have you come up with one yet?
I actually haven't. My preview will be dropping on the site tomorrow because it's a noon game. I haven't written the prediction part yet. I do think Georgia covers, but they don't cover by a lot. I think that's a fourth quarter cover. I think this is it's funny, I'm not going to say who, but another South Carolina writer weirdly said, this is going to be a weirdly close, 13-10 game at halftime, and then Georgia's going to pull away. Someone else said that to me yesterday. I don't know about that, but I do think this is a 2-possession game at halftime that Georgia pulls away in the second half. Let's go 42-17, and Georgia just barely covers, but South Carolina gets the ball in the end zone a couple times. I think you have a little bit higher scoring for South Carolina.
I do. It's an optimistic score considering no one scored a touchdown on Georgia yet.
Georgia all season, yeah.
Yeah, but that was the same scenario last year too. And South Carolina was the first team to score a touchdown against Georgia. So I picked 45-27, which means I think Rattler's going to hit some of those big plays if they open up this time. I think some of that might be some garbage time, just scoring a couple touchdowns late like they did last week. But yeah, I think this offense can score, especially if the game does get out of hand in the third, early fourth, and Georgia starts to play some reserves. I think that they could still score some points. So 27, I have them covering, backdoor cover. And, I'm hoping that it's much closer than that because it would be a lot more fun if it is.
If that's what happens, if South Carolina loses this game 45-27, and also nobody gets hurt, and Rattler plays as well as that line score would suggest, I think you're probably feeling okay going into Charlotte and SC State if you're a South Carolina fan.
Yeah, you can definitely take some moral victories there, which I know, the culture that Shane Beamer's trying to create doesn't celebrate moral victories or whatever. But if you're just being realistic, guy in year 2, we got a really great recruiting class coming down the pike. It's ranked 17th on Rivals right now, with 5-star Nick Harper still out there. We'll see how it goes. You've laid the foundation, like I said, number 1 kid in 2025, several kids in 2024. You already got your quarterback set for 2024. You can feel good about the momentum going. Pretty much no matter what happens in this game, you can feel good about that momentum going. But I'm okay with moral victories against the number 1 team in the country right now. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, and that's probably not what South Carolina fans want to hear, especially against a rival. I think most people would consider Georgia South Carolina's second biggest rival behind Clemson, obviously. But that's where it is right now, and this is a weird rivalry. They got to roll the ball out and play on Saturday.
Do you want to talk a little national perspective on a couple more games real quick?
Yeah, sure. I don't know what to think of Auburn Penn State, but that's probably the game I'm most interested in outside of Columbia. That's just weird. That was a weird game last year at Penn State. It's going to be a weird game. Have you seen this Auburn orange jersey thing that they may or may not be doing an orange out, but nobody knows, but also they might be? It's been like back and forth on socials all week.
But I don't like the Auburn orange. I mean, it looks fine as I guess I don't like any orange, but I mean, I grew up, a South Carolina fan, so that makes sense. But it looks fine as an accent to the blue. I just can't imagine an orange jersey is going to look particularly good. I think, what's that line right now? Like 11?
It's like 3. It's like Penn State -3.
Oh, wow. I thought it was bigger than that. I think
I'm checking for you now.
I think Penn State covers. I'm pretty sure that's one of my 2 or 3 picks that I'm kind of locking in for the week. Penn State covers that one. I don't know. I think the end is nigh for Brian Harsin, and it
is Penn State -3 right now.
Everyone's felt that, but yeah. Okay, yeah. I think I got it at 2.5, so I feel a little bit better about that. But I still think they'll be fine. Yeah.
My only thing with that is
who's starting at Penn State? Clifford. So
it's still Clifford,
like 6-year starter or something.
Yeah, Clifford in a very, very tough road environment. He didn't play well at all on the road at Purdue. They pulled it out of the fire in the last 30 seconds. I don't know. We talk about Georgia, South Carolina being weird. Auburn in general is weird. We'll see what happens there.
Yeah, for sure. Let's see. We got Miami, Texas A&M. You think Texas A&M is going to bounce back after App State, or do the wheels just sort of start to fall off there? What's going on?
I think the wheels are falling there. I don't even think Miami's particularly good, but my A&M thing is just, it goes back to what we talked about with Arkansas last week. It's just line play, and A&M's offensive line, 4 and 5 stars in all, got bullied by a Sun Belt line on both sides last week. App State time of possession was over 40 minutes. And you actually saw this, and I couldn't believe it Saturday night. Do you know how many first downs A&M had last week, the entire game?
I have no idea.
9.
I watched it, but I'm
9.
Yeah, you can't get bullied by an App State defense. I mean, they are good, but you got 5 stars all over the field.
You got oil money there.
Yeah. I think I heard this from another podcast, but I can't remember, but I completely agree. They're just, and it's something I haven't really thought about, but they're talking about how Jimbo is the only head coach that's a former offensive coordinator that has one of the most boring offenses in the country that I can think of. So yeah, I mean, I think their defense is really good. Their defense is going to continue to be really good, which in most games, but that offense is struggling right now. That'll be interesting to see.
Also, no idea what to make of Miami. They've played 2 games, one against the FCS, one against the pretty bad G5. They won both in blowouts. Cool. That's kind of their equivalent with Charlotte and SC State. Now, real game on the road, College Station. We're going to see.
Yeah. I'm also looking forward to see what Mississippi State can do against LSU. They've looked pretty good so far. LSU has not, but I don't know. You think about it, if they don't have all those mistakes against Florida State and they are, pull that game out or whatever. Because right now I think they're the underdog here by like 2 points.
I think it's Mississippi
3 points,
State
something
minus
like that. I think that.
I think is what I saw it at.
Yeah. Yeah, a couple of plays go the other way there, and I think LSU is probably a 5-point favorite or something here at home.
Sure.
So I don't know. I don't know how bad it is yet, and I don't know how good Mississippi State is yet. That'll be an interesting to watch. A good measuring stick for both, I think.
Yeah, you got a Saturday night in Death Valley. That's always just a fun setting on television and a tough environment for Mississippi State.
Yeah, I mean, it's been surprising how decent their defense has been so far. Definitely seem to be built a little bit different. Yeah. Definitely seem to be built a little bit different than the Washington State and Texas Tech teams that Leach had. Real quick, the baseball schedule dropped. I don't know if you want to just really quickly talk a little bit about that while I'm queuing up the video between me and Anthony.
Yeah, so the SEC schedule dropped. We still don't know about the non-conference series other than Clemson, obviously, and the midweeks. But for the weekends, the SEC schedule dropped yesterday. It does get a little bit favorable down the stretch. They're going to get Missouri. They're going to get Georgia. They're going to get an Auburn team that just lost the best player in the SEC last year to Major League Baseball, or the draft at least. He's in the minors now. But there's no way around it. That opening stretch is brutal. First 2 weekends at Arkansas versus LSU. This team's going to have to stay afloat early, and we'll see what the non-conference schedule is. But at least in terms of SEC, they're going to have to find a way to not get knocked out of the season before the turn, because this could be a bad start, and given everything else around the program right now, that could we'll talk way more baseball in the spring. That could turn sour with a schedule that tough out of the gate in conference play.
Yeah, I was looking at Stephen Anderson's breakdown on GamecocksGroup.com of the schedule, and one thing that I kind of noted is it is a brutal schedule, but it also feels like no matter how you slice it in the SEC, the schedule is going to be tough. Like, I don't know that you can get the SEC schedule to drop and be like, oh yeah, that's an easy slate, So it's gonna be tough, but also if you make it gauntlet, as we saw this year, tons of SEC schools made it all the way to the College World Series because it's the best conference in America. If you can make it through it's very similar to football. If you can make it through the gauntlet, then you're probably a favorite on the national stage as well. So,
yeah.
All right. Anything else before we get out of here that you wanted to talk about? Georgia, South Carolina, anything?
I think we pretty much hit on all bases here. Big weekend, y'all. Enjoy it. Have some fun. Tailgate, but if you tailgate early. Shane wants you in your seats before noon.
Yeah, and Alan and I will both be at Williams-Brice this weekend. So if you see either of us, just say what's up. And looking forward to covering my first game of the season in person. After we hop off here, there's another little 10-minute segment of me talking to Anthony Dasher at UGAsports.com. So definitely stick around and check that out. Get some insight from the other side, how he sees this game play out. Don't forget to go check us out at GamecocksGroup.com. Subscribe on whatever podcast or video platform you like to use, and we'll see you on Sunday or Saturday to break down this game. Till next time, this has been Caleb Alexander, Alan Cole. See you later. Hey again, and welcome back to the GamecockScoop.com podcast. This is the segment that we're calling View from the Other Side, and I'm joined by Anthony Dasher from UGAsports.com, also on the Rivals Network. Great site over there. You guys should go check that out. And we're talking South Carolina and Georgia. Georgia's traveling to Williams-Brice Stadium this week and is a very heavy favorite. I think it's sitting at like 24.5 right now, or that's what it opened at. Sounds about right for the reigning national champs. So that's actually where I wanted to start. So Georgia's fresh off of a national championship, but many people kind of heading into the season wondered if it could continue at that high level, especially after losing several players off of one of the best defensive teams in college football of all time. Definitely arguable. 5 defensive players taken in the first round of the NFL draft in April. So how are you feeling about that reload after seeing 2 games so far in the 2022 season? I know probably most fans saw that they blew out Oregon game 1. So
yeah, through 2 games, so far so good. I'm not sure if we have all our answers yet as far as how good this Georgia defense will ultimately be. A lot of guys are playing that don't have a lot of experience as far as what they're going to see Saturday coming into a hostile road environment. But you look at players that Georgia's replaced, the Georgias and Trayvon Walkers of the world with. I mean, again, these are all former 4-star, 5-star players, very highly recruited kids. May not have the number. People may not know their names quite as well yet as they did that group last year. But it's an outfit that I think a lot of people that I speak with daily expect will continue to improve as the year goes along, and they'll get another I think a good test on Saturday.
Yeah, like you said, so weekly we do the little star comparison. I haven't finished ours yet this week, but I've already started looking, and it's pretty nice that you lose a lot to NFL draft, but you have 4 and 5-star guys kind of stepping in right there. After them, I am interested to see if the road environment makes a difference. Although I would have rather seen it at the 3:30 or a night game instead of a noon game. But I still think that the stadium will be full and loud, at least by the second quarter or so, if South Carolina can hang around for a little bit and put some pressure on them. So really quickly, how would you say Georgia fans view South Carolina? I know for a while there seemed like there was a rivalry starting to fully form while Spurrier was there, but I assume at this point they kind of view this game as one they expect to win yearly.
I think most fans I speak to probably do think that way. Although again, South Carolina seems to come up every other 2 or 3 years, whatnot, and knock Georgia off like they did in Athens. I know what 2-3 years ago there. So I don't think it's a game that fans take for granted. You mentioned the rivalry. I think it is there. I mean, Georgia has a lot of very good rivalries. I mean, just like South Carolina does. I mean, Florida, Tennessee, Auburn. You can probably ask 5 different Georgia fans, perhaps, and maybe even get 5 different answers, kind of depending on where those people happen to live. But it's obviously a big game. It's kind of weird playing it early, at noon. I guess like it is. I've been to Columbia countless times. I tell you what, night games at William Bryce can be scary for an opposing team. And so I am interested to see how this early kickoff is going to affect both squads.
Yeah, it'll be my first game that I get to attend this season as well. So I'm looking forward to it, but it would have been nice to see it under the lights and everything. So what I usually ask what matchups you feel that your team has the advantage, but I feel like pretty much across the board, at least on paper, Georgia probably has the advantage. Do you see any matchups where you feel like South Carolina might have an advantage here?
Well, I'm curious to see Georgia. And I think it's going to be the first time Georgia is going to face a team that can really hurt it throwing the football. And we saw last year what Mr. Van did in Athens. Had a big game, and I know that reading one of your articles this morning, the success that Spencer Rattler has across the middle of the field. I think I read a stat. He's completed like 19 of 21 passes. I know with Coach Beamer, they've always run a lot of crossing routes. You've got a very good tight end set there at South Carolina. And I'm curious to see how Georgia's linebackers, which is in a young group, and its safeties kind of respond because I'm sure that's how South Carolina is going to try to attack Georgia, try to spread things out, soften up that middle of the field. And so that's going to be, I think, a big key for Georgia's defense is how well they do in those aspects of that mid-range passing game for South Carolina.
Yeah, I know in your article that you for our website, which those of you that are listening to this on Thursday, it was posted yesterday. You can check that out. But you mentioned that in Keely Ringo, obviously there's a lot of experience, all SEC selection, all that. But on the other side, Kamari Lassiter is a little bit greener behind the ears or whatever, a little bit more inexperienced. So perhaps that's a place that South Carolina can try to take advantage, is the inexperience in the secondary. But like we've said, there's still highly rooted athletes in that secondary. Yeah, I don't know how much you've seen of South Carolina's first two games, but I would say most Carolina fans would say that even though Rattler threw for almost 400 yards last weekend, he still missed a lot of wide open receivers at times. So if he can hit those, then I think it does put a little bit of pressure on that secondary, because so far 2 games been a lot of open receivers. I mean, there's probably the strength of this team right now between the tight ends and the receivers as far as the most athletic parts of the team. But it's just Rattler hitting those in those key moments. He has hit some big passes at times, but not usually when the pressure's on. So we'll have to see how that plays out at home.
And I'm curious to see what kind of pressure Georgia can create on defense, what kind of havoc they can make as far as defending Spencer is concerned. I know Arkansas had 6 sacks last week. Georgia, interestingly enough, through 2 games only has 1. That's by freshman defenseman Michael Williams. However, you look at what Bo Nix did for Oregon, really quick getting the ball out of his hands. I mean, Coach Mark was saying he averaged like 2.1 seconds, as far as getting the snap and throwing the football. And the same thing last week for Michael Hires at Stanford. Georgia really didn't try to blitz much, didn't try to, get sacks, so to speak. But I think you'll probably see a little more of that this weekend. I mean, Spencer can still hurt you with his legs, obviously, but I think they believe they have more of an opportunity this week to make some things happen. So again, keep an eye out on Michael West, Nolan Smith, Robert Bill Jr., maybe some of these inside linebackers. Jalen Carter, defensive tackle, could be a huge problem for South Carolina. He's a huge problem for both teams. They play at that defensive tackle spot. So that's going. I'm sure when we get to talk to Coach Beamer, during the SEC teleconference, that's something I want to ask him about. I'm sure that's going to be a big issue for them in this contest.
Yeah, the offensive line's definitely had its struggles over the last 2 years. Opening game, they looked pretty poor against Georgia State, who was smaller and sort of used their speed to get around. I thought they looked a little bit better against Arkansas. Like you said, they'd still give up 6 sacks. I don't know if all of those are on the offensive line. Some of that is Rattler kind of running around trying to make too much happen sometimes or whatever. But yeah, I think that's definitely something to be wary of if you're South Carolina going up against this very talented front for Georgia. Are there any injuries that Georgia's dealing with right now that our readers should be aware of?
Well, the biggest one is wide receiver A.D. Mitchell, who was actually the leading receiver in last year's game against South Carolina. He injured his ankle against Sanford. Initially, Coach Smart said after the game that he could have gone back in, but lo and behold, yesterday he did not practice, and I would probably list him as doubtful. And right now, I'd probably be surprised if he plays. But that said, I mean Georgia already has 16 different players who have caught passes from Stetson Bennett. And so even if they're minus A.D. Mitchell, they're going to have plenty of targets, left. So that's been the question: what's the difference in this year's Georgia team? It's the fact they're using so many kids, in that passing game, and Stetson Bennett is doing a great job spreading the football around.
Yeah, so that was actually my next question, is kind of what you think Georgia's going to try to do on offense. And when I was looking at the box score, at least for Oregon, found it very interesting to see that they only ran it 25 times for 132 yards versus throwing it 37 times for 439 yards, which seems kind of flipped from what their offensive philosophy has been in the past. Do you kind of expect that to continue?
I will say a lot of those passes, especially that Oregon game. Kenny McIntosh actually led Georgia in receiving with 9 catches and has 14 for their leads the team right now. So a lot of these passes to the backs are almost like extended handoffs.
Right.
So that's how, and Kirby Smart counts those as runs. And last week, Kendall Milton had a great game, running the ball, 10 carries for 85 yards. And I know, just on what South Carolina, the struggles they've had stopping the run so far, I do think you may see Georgia make more of a concerted effort. That being said, they still want to spread the ball around. They want to. Stetson Bennett again is averaging 337 yards passing through 2 games, so they're going to still want to try to do that. But I do think you'll see them, see if they can have the same type of running the ball and be balanced, a little more balanced rather.
Yeah, definitely. And I didn't realize that so many of those were dump offs. So that makes sense. So, all right. Last question. I'm going to put you on the spot. Do you have a score prediction for this weekend?
I do think Georgia wins. I like what Shane Beamer has done. I like the culture he's building at South Carolina. I think he's ultimately going to do a good job. If fans just have patience with him, I know him a little bit. I know what kind of coach he is. From the time here at UGA, and if he will stick with him, I think he'll be fine. That said, I just think right now Georgia has just too much offensive. I think Carolina can have some success moving the football. They're going to have to run ball a lot better than they have. Especially after last week. But I think Spencer Rattler can make some plays against this secondary again, which is young in some spots. So I think right now Georgia, I think Georgia will somewhere maybe 42-21, 42-17 range, something of that nature.
Yeah, so that's right around the spread right at 24 and a half.
About, not saying they're going to hit the spread, but I mean, I think it'll be somewhere in that vicinity.
Yeah, it's a lot of points for a road game in the SEC. I'll probably pick South Carolina to cover, but obviously can't pick them to win a game like this right now. And yeah, I'm interested to see what South Carolina's offensive philosophy will be this game. You mentioned the run game. They didn't run terribly against Arkansas when they tried to. It just they didn't try to run the ball until late in the second quarter, really. So I think our beat reporter Alan Cole had a stat that Arkansas had 120 something rushing yards before the first running back attempt from South Carolina, because I think they ran it a little bit with like Gene Bell or something, but the actual first running back attempt, Arkansas already had 100 something yards rushing. So I'll be interested to see if they try to exploit the youth and Georgia secondary and just come out slinging the ball around again, or if they try to be a little bit more stubborn establishing the run before letting that happen. Because I think you're right that Georgia's offense is a little more dangerous maybe than it had seemed in the past. So maybe they try to keep them off the field a little bit. Well, thank you for joining us today, Anthony.
My pleasure.
And all our watchers, readers, definitely go check out UGAsports.com for coverage leading up to the game this week. And yeah, we'll see you on Saturday.
See you Saturday.
Have a good one.
Yep.